Decals. Decals run vertically. The image needs to be prepared in a way that when the end is reached, the other end begins. That will prevent you from having a seam. An easy way to do this is to load it into your photo editor Now I will mess this up on purpose. So to make this not have a seam, what you can do is duplicate the layer and then flip it vertically. Now the bottom of this is here at the top. All we're going to do now is flatten the image. Not flatten the image. Merge visible layers. See, this is using an alpha transparency, so it is invisible on the edges and it blends into the sides. So this image, you're going to save it in your level. Now if you got your level loaded, go to the world editor and hit here, save level, press save level. That's going to make a user folder that you can put your textures in. So at your image, when you export it or save it as, you'll see in the user folder for the level that you're currently in, you'll see make a new folder and you can name it whatever you'd like, and then that's where you will put your image. That way when you're in the game and you make the texture, you're getting the texture from the right place. So in the world editor, you're going to need to make a material. So let's do a new one. Let's make this new dirt road. Create. Go down to the very bottom. At the very bottom of the list, you'll see additional info. Open that up and type in road and path, all one word, and that's going to go in the material tag there. Press enter. If this is not here, your material will not be available in the decal editor. Now that you got that set, you'll want to put your image in there that you saved. Go to lighting and turn on anisotropic filtering and save the material. Now go to the decal road editor here, and while holding down the Alt key, left click and move your mouse while still holding down the Alt key. Every time you left click, it will make a new node. You can adjust these nodes, but be careful, they can kink if you are not careful. You can delete nodes by selecting the node and hitting delete. You can select all the nodes, and in the inspector window for the decal, with all the nodes selected, you can change the width of them all at one time if you want, or you can individually select them and change them like this. Next, go to the material and select that texture that you just created. Now it's likely going to not have the correct aspect ratio, so what you do, since decals can stretch, depending on how wide the decal is, it may not need to be adjusted. In this case, it's fine, but if you had a wider decal, you would need to adjust the texture length so that it is correct. Now I said this has an invisible alpha transparency, so what you'll want to do is in the material editor for that material, go to advanced and turn on the alpha blend mode to lerp alpha. Now you can save the material. Now let's talk about what if you got two decals. You got a special track and you got two decals that are going to cross over one another. And we will say that'll be the one decal. And your new decal will be the other decal. Now, what determines which decal is on top of what decal and which is under what decal is the decal's render priority. The lower the number, the more priority it's got. By default, they all have 10. So if you made two decals and you wanted this one to be on the bottom, on the top, then you would give it a higher priority. The lower the number, the higher the priority. So by putting 9, that's higher priority than 10. See, this one's 10. Now if you change your mind, you could just make it lower than the other one. So either way, but eventually you're going to run out of room when you get down to 1. So if you got a lot of decals, you'll want to be mindful where you start at. And each one you put down that's got the most priority, because you can run out of numbers. There's also a glitch, or it's either a memory limitation. It is something that you may make you may do this. You may make a very big decal. And you may find that after a while it just stops drawing. The large decals do not do well. You'll a lot of times have to adjust the smoothness, the detail amount. It can be something that you deal with big decals. That's why I wouldn't make really big decals. Another thing you might encounter is, say you're using this decal here and it's going to be dirt that is on the track. But after a while, you'll find that the decal will eventually just stop making decal. It'll just run out. It'll say, you know what, I'm done. I'm not giving you any more dirt roads. You got too many. Now what you have to do when you run into that, you just need to split it up into two different decals. Now we're not having this problem here. Let me see if I can make it do it. Well, it appears that it ran out right there. So go to this one and split the road. You can also add a new node by holding Alt and clicking in between a node and another node to insert a node. You can also press delete and delete a node. Now when you can't join these together, you shouldn't have to. You can just overlap them over one another. Another thing, making a decal. At the ends of the decal, where they start and begin, you can do a start fade and end fade. greater the number, the more of a fade. If your decal is going to be used for AI roads, then with the decal selected in the inspector window, you'll want to change the drivability to 1. And then you'll have lanes left, lanes right, whether it's one way, flip direction, gated road, means the road's open to the public. I never messed with that. I think that's pretty much it. There's a lot of other things. Over objects is if you have a mesh, a 3D mesh, and you want the decal to go over the top of the 3D mesh. But I don't have much luck using that every time I try to use it. It doesn't really work out for me very well. As you can see here, oh, there's also over objects here. Now why it's in both places, I couldn't tell you. Now the collision mesh for this may be what's causing the problem. The collision mesh, if it's not exactly the mesh and it's using a lower poly model, for example, the decal will cling to that model. You can change the visible mesh final and it'll use the exact model that the 3D mesh is. And you can see it still does not do right. Yeah, I don't know why. It's not something I usually worry about because I don't mess with it. I don't mess with this. But somebody's gonna want to know, so that's what it's supposed to do. If you're making a decal, you'll want to always use the lerp alpha like we discussed in the texture. If you do not have a lerp alpha and you got none for your texture, right? And you have that texture go over another texture, you're going to get some really ugly artifact. You can see here what I'm talking about. And it doesn't matter which one's got more priority or less priority in this case. They both are fighting for the same. They're both fighting for the same thing, apparently. That's why you have to put the alpha blend. Now, if you want it to be a less of an amount, you can lower the alpha amount. Somewhere you may want to have just a hint of the texture. In other places, you may want it to be more obvious. Now, if you want two different decals with one's got less transparency than the other, then you'll need to make another texture so that you got two different ones. One with less alpha than the other. Next is the distance fade. The distance fade is how far away from the camera you can be before the decal starts to fade away. Each decal you put down can have its own distance fade. That's how that works. Another thing someone may want to know is, well, in the material editor, there's a place for ground types. Can I add a custom ground model to the decal? No, it does not work. Decals do not use ground models, even though the material, you can put it, say it's got it. The ground model is actually determined by the terrain paint that's underneath the decal. Grass that is under it. They did not make it mud because I told it to be mud. It would not be mud. If you wanted it to be mud, then you'd have to paint it with the mud, the terrain paint that's using mud. I think that's pretty much it. I can't think of nothing else.